Welcome back to the Titanium Hanger. Happy Friday, everybody. I hope everybody's doing well this Friday and has a great weekend. I'm going to talk to you about the end of the 12-inch Masterpiece era. It's actually kind of ended a while ago, but it's taken a while for me to accept it. I'm one of the few people that actually loved the 12-inch size and scale, so I'm going to talk about that. But if you look at this table, everything on this table is a KO except for Megatron, the MPO5, and that's a terrible figure, by the way. But we're going to take a look at this. We're going to do some comparisons to the normal size, and I'm going to talk about why I feel 12-inch was great. But now, 5 years later, after I really got into the 12-inch, the new 9-inch scale, I've accepted it, and I'm going to tell you why I think the 9-inch actually was a good idea, and why the end of the 12-inch era is not a bad thing. Although I'm a little sad about it, I'm going to talk about this and more, do some comparisons, and this is one video, and I'm going to do another video next week. This is the kicking off of another KO discussion, because there's actually something nobody else is talking about that's good about KOs. We'll talk about that next week. But we're going to talk about these KOs coming up. So, I've made a lot of videos talking about 12-inch Masterpiece Transformers over the past few years, and the KO oversizing isn't over yet. It's more or less oversizing Studio Series into sort of a Masterpiece scale. We don't really see that many G1 figures upscaled from the Masterpiece into the old 12-inch line from the new 9-inch scale, 9-inch line. So with that, you're still going to see stuff like that going on with some Beast Wars Studio Series getting upscaled, and then some of the movie characters did get upscaled to the 12-inch scale and those kinds of things. But I'm focusing this video directly on the G1 characters that were made of older series. So the first point I want to make is I like the 12-inch scale because they are so big. So I have specifically Sideswipe and Optimus Prime. So MPP-10, the Wei Zhang, and this one I think is called Tanaka or something along those lines. And so with that, specifically I have those here showing you how big they are and how good they look next to vintage toys. As I'm sort of struggling to get the correct angle here that it looks good on camera, I do want to show back in the day we would have 3.75 inch scale back in the 80s that really ruled action figures. But Transformers were a bit bigger, but in my mind Transformers should have towered over the 3.75 inch scale figures, and these KO Oversized do. If you look at that, to me that feels more like you're in the Transformers world with the 12-inch figure next to the predominant 3.75-inch scale. Now looking at it like this with the actual scale of Masterpiece, and then they don't look impressive at all. It really, I couldn't see these guys riding in that. And so for that, for me in my headcanon, and then this didn't work very well for me Masterpiece-wise when they scaled it down. But later on, I'm going to tell you why I actually am happy that they did it long term. But right now, when I was originally clicking the 12-inch stuff, I was really disappointed that they started scaling it down, starting with the 03, which is Starscream. So one of the things I didn't like about Masterpiece scale was the fact the carbots were so small. And I keep saying this over and over, and this is a debate that's always going to go on. But I felt like they should just been a little bit taller. I felt they should have come up to almost Prime's chest, and then we should have seen Ironhide just one head shorter. Ironhide and that whole class of those figures, that scale class should have been like right at his chest, and then the rest, some of them more equal to his size. But I didn't think that carbots should just come up to the waist. I mean, it almost feels like mini bots should be there, and then the carbots should be about up to his chest. So the lower part of his chest, and then the other one's a little bit taller. So with that, the KO Oversized fixed it in my headcanon. From what I remember of the show and the way I see it, this scales perfectly. The KO Oversized scale perfectly for the carbots. And so I like that. The only problem is this is what they call a Tanaka, I believe. And it's got like a knock on Takara, or in a way, kind of a knock off of Takara. But I think that this is the only one that was ever made. Sideswipe was it, and I believe Sideswipe was one of the first carbots anyway. So the MP12 mold was one of the first ones. So with that, they didn't go past it. I don't know if it wasn't good enough sales or whatever. I think it was like a $60 figure back in the day, but I think it's really cool. And so with that, the scale was corrected in my mind for the 12-inch. That's why I liked it so much. Now, I've talked a lot about MP01 and MP10, and this is MPP10. I don't have the MP01 out, and I don't display that one. It's just kind of tucked away, and I don't have that in this video. But this video is predominantly the KO oversized, which I'm just not seeing in G1 anymore, no new ones. And with this, I want to point out that they fixed a lot of things on this figure. And for me, the proportions of the lower legs were the biggest problem that I saw. When you look down here at the lower legs, the bump out is kind of big on this leg. They kind of minimized it a bit on the MPP10, so it's a little more of a streamlined look of a leg, and the overall look of the MPP10 is better, in my opinion, than the look of the MP10. Now, this is the chrome version. I love the chrome. I mean, I'm never gonna not like the chrome that's on that thing, but the lower leg was a turn off to me, and so proportionally, I like the KO oversized better. And so when you're making a whole new mold to upscale it to 12 inches, you're having to have a new mold. You can't just use the same old mold that Takara was using. And so with that, they were able to make changes as they were making the new molds. And that's pretty simple. So that's kind of, in my mind, this is the beginning of when major changes were made to figures that were major improvements in the KO market. Okay, so speaking of improvements, I think that the Wei Zhang, when they KO oversized the Ratchet and the Hound from Takara, they made some improvements there. Now, overall, I think it's kind of a wonky looking figure, the original. I think that the Ratchet, because of the color scheme with the white with the small red accents, looks better than the red and the silver and all that kind of stuff. And also the way the design of the pelvis, and this Ratchet just looks better than the Ironhide. That's why I'm displaying him, to make Takara look as good as I can make them look. But when you see this little side hip flap kind of thing that's going on, there was a Shadow Fisher kit that fixed that. Those things are expensive now. They weren't quite as expensive, 5 years ago, whenever that they first put that kit out, but now they're getting harder and harder to track down, and I don't know if they've done reissues. And I'm not going to put $25 into a $40 KO. This is also KO, by the way. And I wasn't going to buy it officially because I thought it looked terrible. It's got good elements of it, but overall, this is not a great looking figure. But the Wei Zhang came along, and I don't know if they just copied the Shadow Fisher kit, if it's exactly the same as the kit, but they fixed it. And so with that, fixing it, making it a little bit better, and improving on the mold. And so with that, that's another thing that I liked about the KO oversized versions, that they would fix the mold. And then with that, it gave me hope for the future that we might get a reissue in a smaller size. But see, that was misguided because they'd have to make all new molds to reissue it in the regular size, because they can't just use that same mold and make it this small. So with that, my face fell off. Wei Zhang is one of the best KO companies in the business because they make good quality figures and they make improvements to the original mold so that their figures are actually better than the originals. And they were operating in a space that was actually relatively safe because they were oversizing. They weren't even competing with the original product. What they were doing was creating a whole different market, the original 12-inch scale market. They should have left Bumblebee and they should have left Iron Man alone. They'd still be around. Well, they probably still are around, just under different names. So one of the things I thought was kind of funny is that Wei Zhang just, instead of calling it MP10, MP26, and all that kind of stuff, they call it MPP10, MPP26, that kind of stuff. So this Inferno overall was a good figure. When this Inferno came out, the original one, now this is a KO of the original, but when the original Inferno came out, everybody raved over the figure, how awesome it was. Now, I think it's a good figure. I just didn't really like the proportions, the wide hips. It is too tuned to a detriment. You can even swap this piece here out and make it more tuned with a kind of a tune flat colored grill and that kind of stuff. But, and it's been so long since I've had the box out for this guy, I don't remember if they include that part, but I'm pretty sure Wei Zhang included that part. So they KO oversized it. So what was already a pretty good looking figure, tune accurate figure, and a well performing figure, because it hid the ladder in the back and all in the midsection, all that kind of stuff. It just made it bigger and more solid. So with that, this is definitely a win. Now, one thing I forgot to do was I was going to look up and see if they made a grapple, but for some reason I think they didn't make a grapple. They might have, but I'm not sure if they did or not. But I'm going to have to look that up now because that's now getting on my nerves. But I probably would have picked it up because these were like 60. So the KOs of this guy were 40, and then the Weijing KO Oversized was 60. And I believe that this KO Oversized is worth every penny of $60. And let's go ahead and turn around real quick and just see if the difference right here, is there much difference? No, they look pretty much exactly the same. So next up, we have the KO Oversized of Seekers. Now, this is the MP11 mold, and there were two companies making them. There was the Tanaka, like we saw with the Sideswipe. From my recent research, because all I remember back in the day was the one that was called Robot Hero, the ones I got. Those got raving reviews, and oddly enough, when the first run sold out, those shot through the roof in price. So when the second run came out, I jumped on them. I never got the Thundercracker because by then I had a finite space to display them and I didn't have room for Thundercracker, and I just don't like buying stuff I can't display. And so with that, I didn't buy Thundercracker. So now I kind of wish I did, now that we're getting to the end of this era of 12-inch KOs of the G1. And so with that, but I'm still kind of happy that I at least got, I like Skywarp with the purple and the black. And you got to have sort of Starscream because the main guy, Thundercracker to me was number 3 because I didn't like that baby blue. But looking at them side by side with the modern era, I like the aesthetic of the modern better. And so with that, we start getting into the first kind of problem with collecting the 12-inch scale, is that there's going to be more options coming out in the future. And will this get knocked off of KO Oversized? Probably not. And we're seeing the end of the knocking off and oversizing of the G1 stuff. And is anybody going to come out and make one specifically for a 12-inch scale? No. So if you're a 12-inch scale collector, it was already hard in the beginning, and now it's just impossible because most companies give up on this scale because it just doesn't sell well right away. But for whatever reason, 5 years ago, when they put these out, they sold really well, and then we're selling crazy on the secondary market. But the market's changed, times have changed, things have shifted, and we're going to talk more about that. Okay, next up we're going to talk about Megatron, and this is the MP05, the only official one on the table. This guy here is the MP36, but it is a KO, it is the Magtin, it is the shiny one. I'm trying not to have too much of a reflection here. MP05 was designed in 12 days, versus now where it takes Fans Toys Blitzwing is a 7-year project. Some people say it takes 9 years to make a Masterpiece Transformer. So, I mean, hey, that's something I've been hearing recently. I don't think that's really the development cycle. I think it's more like 3 years, actually. But anyway, getting into this, 12 days isn't enough. As you can see, he can barely stand, and he would not be able to stand at all with his cannon. There's no way he could do this that the MP36 does, which is more or less a feat of engineering to go from something like this that's so horrible everyone hated, but yet paid a lot of money for because it was the only option, to this. Now, this was 05, was in the works already, I guess, or I'm not sure why, but 05 went back to the 12-inch scale, and then after that, they were all more or less the 9-inch scale. It's a terrible figure. Now, you go, well, where's the Weijing KO Oversized MP36? Well, the Weijing made an MPP36, but it did not exactly match the design. It was their own design, and I thought it was a little strange. I actually was hoping it was a KO Oversized MP36, but it was not. And it was not like a shiny metallic like this. It was a matte finish, and it had some weird wonky thing with the knee, the way it transformed, that every time someone was posing it, that knee would kind of shift in and out. It was not something that I was really impressed with by looking at it or reviews, and so I didn't touch it. So with that, we get into the next issue. So if you're in the 12-inch scale, you have very, very limited options. So yes, you're going to have limited options, and well, now the options are none, or seek out the secondary market, because none of this stuff's getting reissued. But that's the only way to find this stuff on the secondary market. But going forward, what are you going to do going forward if nothing's getting produced for the G1, KO Oversized 12-inch scale, or directly for it? No options. And with that, seeing all the great stuff in the 9-inch scale, you just kind of have to just stop with the 12-inch. Doesn't mean I'm selling it. I'm not selling any of it. I'm not getting rid of any of it. It's just have to accept it, right? Okay, so every other 12-inch scale video I've made talking about this and this whole concept has been from a fanboy that loves the 12-inch scale, and I've kind of proven my case in the first part of this video. The rest of this video is going to prove why Takara was right to make it a 9-inch scale. So my first point is a big point. Some characters would just have to be huge, like abnormally large, way too big. So I'm not bringing combiners into this because that's a mess, trying to get all that in the review space at once. But as you can see here, this is the Fans Toys Phoenix. I already think it's a big figure. I don't want Phoenix to be any bigger than he already is. But if you were to get a Jetfire, which Takara's Jetfire is going to be about the same size. So if you're to get a Jetfire, Skyfire, and you were to KO oversize him to the 12-inch scale instead of him being 14 inches and he's 20 inches, then combiners have to be something stupid like 36 inches. And then a Citybot needs to be 7 foot. And you see where we're going with this. 3 inches for the scale and to keep everything else in scale would just be ridiculous, would be ludicrous. And I think they figured that out early on. Another thing about why they're shifting it, and this is the official explanation, was that they originally did not plan it to be a line that scaled together. It was supposed to be individual, each masterpiece. This was a masterpiece of Prime and a masterpiece of another one, just separate works of art. And I don't really believe that 100%, but that's what somebody had told me, because of the fact they numbered them. If they didn't start numbering them and giving them MP01 through whatever we're on now, 70, I don't know. But if they didn't number them like that, I would believe that a little bit more, that they never intended to be a line. But maybe it did start out, they made a few, let's see how it goes, and then go from there, and it was wildly popular. So the next point here, there are so many other companies that are making figures, that are great figures, that won't scale with this, and will never see a version for the 12-inch scale. And so when you start thinking about it, you've got X-Transbots, MMC, Fans Toys, and a whole bunch of other Fans Project, the Dinobots, all this kind of stuff that really won't scale with the 12-inch. And with that, they're already pretty darn expensive at 9-inch. So one thing is having a bunch of great options at the 9-inch scale, but then how much more would those cost if they were trying to hit this 12-inch scale? If Takara had perpetually continued a 12-inch scale, we wouldn't be looking at a $200 figure for the high end. We'd be looking at $300, $400, and $500, especially now with prices going up and all that kind of stuff. But for the most part, the massive amount of money goes into the engineering of these. But then if you add on materials and more shipping costs, then the prices would just skyrocket. So they're already expensive at the 9-inch scale. They'd be ridiculously expensive, and you just wouldn't be able to flesh out an entire collection that looked good. It would be out of balance if everyone else was making 9-inch, Takara stayed with 12-inch. If Takara stayed with 12-inch, everybody else would have been making 12-inch. So the next thing I want to get into, this point is the biggest point, the most impactful point, and what I hear the most nowadays. I didn't used to hear this the most 5 years ago. I hear it the most nowadays because a lot of collectors have been collecting for a long time, and there's a lot more options out there, and that's space. So if you look at this, I think this visual with the exact same number of characters and the exact same characters, you notice that there's so much more space on the left with the standard 9-inch scale. And I didn't used to care about that because I would reallocate my space resources to Masterpiece and give Masterpiece what they needed. That was my thing. That's what I started doing early on. But I didn't think that we'd have 100 Masterpiece figures, 100 characters. I didn't think that we'd ever see that. And now we're there, or really near it. And so with that, you have to start to understand space is one of those things that if you can't create more of it, you need as much real estate as possible. And the more big figures you stick over here, the more cluttered it's going to look. For the same amount of space, you can make it look good and add more characters. So as a quick visual aid, I just tossed in almost double the amount of figures on the left. That takes up about the same amount of space, and just randomly tossed them up there. This wasn't like an extreme posing and displaying session, but it's just to prove a point, just to get a visual. So I agree. Takara did a good job with switching to the 9-inch, and I'm finally going to eat my own words and say, yes, I'm glad they did it. Because as I'm reworking my display, I'm putting new characters, new figures in there, and looking forward to the Omnibots, and looking forward to Punch, Counter Punch, and both versions, so one on each Decepticon Autobot shelf, and look forward to a lot of new things coming from the Masterpiece that I want to display. I'm happy to go with the 9-inch and to stop with the 12-inch in 2023. So there's my points about the 12-inch. I still love the 12-inch for what it is. I'm happy we got what we got. If I maybe made a short list of characters that I would like to see, I would like to have seen a 12-inch Soundwave, of course. I would have liked to see a handful more. Would have liked to see the 12-inch Scale, RC, and a few more. But past all of that, I am happy with ending it where it is, not getting any more KO Oversized, not getting any targeted 12-inch, and let some of the movie figures, the Bayverse figures, some of those get that treatment. Maybe the Rise of the Beast might get the treatment, but now we're in the new era of just KO Oversizing Studio Series for some reason. That's the new thing, the hip thing that's going on. But I want to hear what you think. What side of the 12-inch versus 9-inch debate are you? Are you happy for the 9-inch for the reasons I pointed out? Would you like to have seen 12-inch for the reasons I pointed out? And this is part of the larger KO debate, which I'm going to rehash next week, next Friday, talking about KOs again. But I'm going to ultimately talk about the one thing that every single collector will have to agree. There's no way to disagree with the major point that I'm going to bring up next week in the KO debate. I brought it up once before, but I didn't really go too deep into it. I'm going to deep dive into it next week, because even people who absolutely hate KO with every ounce of their being will have to agree with this one point that I'm making out of many points next week. So let me know what you think, comments below, like and subscribe to Dear Hanger out.